Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny panel. During the live broadcast, members and officers are asked to please ensure that mobile phones are placed in silent mode and that microphones are switched off while not in use. The first item on today's agenda is the appointment of the chair for the municipal year 2023-24. Do I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Councillor Hay.
I would like to propose Councillor Maureen Davis as chair.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, please?
I would like to second that proposal.
Thank you. Are there any alternative proposals? It is therefore proposed that Councillor Maureen Davis is appointed as the chair of the Overview and Scrutiny panel for the municipal year 2023-24. Is that agreed? Yes. Thank you. I'll now hand over conduct of the meeting to the chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We've had apologies from Councillor Carney and Councillor Roy. And I should also add that the leader who usually joins these meetings is currently in another meeting, but he will join us as soon as possible. And if needed, we'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. The next item on the agenda is the appointment of vice chair for the municipal year 2023-24. I would like to nominate Councillor Roy Gerstner. Can I have a seconder, please? All right, okay, thank you. Right, are there any other nominations? No, thank you very much. In that case, the proposal is therefore to appoint Roy Gerstner as the vice chair of the Overview and Scrutiny panel for the municipal year 2023-24. Is that agreed? Thank you. Councillor Gerstner, you're duly appointed vice chair.
Thank you.
Right, the next item, agenda item 4, we're being asked to approve the public minutes, and those are at pages 3 to 10 of the public agenda pack, as a correct record of the meeting which took place on 27th February 2023. Can I ask any member who does not agree with the minutes to indicate that now? Councillor Booth.
Chair, just one typo, I think, in the guests. It should be Jonathan Finley, I believe. There's an O missing from his name. Okay, right, yeah, okay.
Is that okay? Yeah, thank you.
I propose we accept the minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much. There's no objections to the minutes, so they will be recorded as a correct record of the meeting. I'm moving on to item 5. There are no urgent items for consideration today. Oh, is it 6? Yeah, we've done 5. That's 6. Sorry. Okay. So agenda item 7 is on the agenda is an update on the actions arising from previous. Oh, beg your pardon. You can see I'm reading from a script. I won't deny it. So agenda item 6 is to receive any declarations of interest under the local code of conduct or any interest on code of conduct on planning matters in respect of any items to be discussed at the meeting. If you have anything to declare, please can you inform the meeting now? No hands are raised. Ah.
So,
Councillor Booth.
move over a bit. On the community safety partnership, should be noted I'm a member of community speed watch group in my area, so obviously there are speeding issues.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Councillor Booth. Right. Agenda item 7 is an update on the actions arising from previous meetings of this panel. Are there any questions or comments on the information provided? Councillor Booth.
I believe there was a question to myself before the meeting regarding whether I feel the action about the matter with planning and Clarion has been resolved. I think there's still a disconnect between what we're being told between officers here and members of Clarion about whether pre-application discussions took place. And I think Nick Harding was looking into that. I don't recall having seen a response to it.
So are you saying you want it kept on the agenda, obviously?
Yeah, we've
Yes.
not had a final response. One group is saying one thing, another group is saying something else. Both cannot be correct.
You can look into that, yeah, thank you. So agenda item 7, sorry, did see, sorry.
Yes, I have a query about under ongoing actions. We invited the mayor and they were supposed to attend in December 2022. Do we have any further update on when we can expect to see the mayor come before us?
Amy, would you like to answer that? Yeah.
Yeah, we've written to the mayor's office and provided a list of all the dates for this year's meetings of the overview and scrutiny panel. And we're obviously in the final throes of arranging his attendance. And as soon as that's been confirmed, we'll be able to update the panel. But unfortunately, we weren't able to do it before this meeting, but it is in hand.
Thank you for that. I have one further question, if I may. Under watching brief items, there was an item that Councillor Booth previously requested, and it was to do with planning. Was that what you were mentioning earlier on?
That's separate. So this watching brief items, the review that's being undertaken with Peterborough. What I was going to say though is I think we know what the position is now. Does it actually need to be an ongoing item? Because Councillor Laws gave an update at the last full council meeting. So we know where we are. We've got to move ahead on our own now. I think that closes it. Yeah.
We'll take that off the agenda then, thank you. Are there any further questions or comments? No, thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 8 then. You can find the pages at the 13 to 28 of the agenda pack. And this is an update on the performance of the council's revenues and benefits service since it became part of the ARP in 2014. I'd like to welcome the panel that's here today. I think probably the easiest thing is, would you just introduce yourselves?
Yes, Matthew Waitwright. I'm head of non-domestic rates, recovery and enforcement, and also fraud falls under my portfolio.
Hello, I'm Lorraine King and I'm Head of Benefits, Council Tax Billing and Systems at ARP.
Hello, I'm Sam Anthony, I'm Head of HR and OD and also lead for ARP within Fenland.
Jan French, portfolio holder for ARP.
Thank you. Are you going to make a presentation?
I think either Matthew or Lorraine, because they obviously are the lead members there. It's a very, very lengthy document you've got. So I'm sure if Lorraine or Matthew or even Sam can answer any questions. I did see you do have a number of questions, but they have been answered.
Okay. So I'll just ask, has everyone had the opportunity of reading and reading that presentation? Do you wish it to be represented or should we just go straight to questions?
Propose to go straight to questions, Chair.
Right, so has anybody got any questions? Councillor Hay.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed within the report it mentions about moving over to digitalisation with Department Work in Progress and HMRC. It seems that Department Work in Progress is going well. It did concern me that there is a problem with HMRC and that they won't, you're not allowed to ask for NI numbers and therefore it's difficult to get them to share. What actions are you taking to get around this so that you can share information?
Right, thank you. That falls into my area. So this was part of the Digital Economy Act, where they launched a pilot administered by the Cabinet Office, where we supplied, local authorities supplied lists of customers or debtors who hadn't paid. So the pilot took place with around 42 or something like that authorities, of which Anglia Revenue's partnership was 5 of those. And the idea was that we supplied lists to HMRC and DWP, so we could obtain work details and identify people who are vulnerable who are claiming benefits. Unfortunately, the HMRC team had a change of heart and refused to provide details, working details of the customers if we didn't supply their national insurance numbers. So unfortunately, under council tax legislation, there's no need for any billing authority to retain national insurance numbers, and it is an item of personal data. So we would be remiss to collect information, personal information, and hold on to that personal data. The trial itself by the Cabinet Office has now closed. So we provided this full feedback to the Cabinet Office. So that trial, this exercise has come to an end. However, there is, let's say, talk. It is proposed that in the future, further trials will take place. We will make the same representations. That we need to be able to see HMRC work details for the collection of council tax. Just to put it in context, once we have somebody's work details, the idea was that we write to those individual customers and say, we've got your work details, please come to a payment arrangement with us. And then if they didn't, we have the power under attachment of earnings order to actually deduct money from their wages. So to answer your question, the trial's come to an end and there's no further progress there.
Right, that sounds interesting enough. But obviously you've given feedback to central government. Have you had any response from central government? Because it seems to me it's pointless setting up a trial if they're creating hurdles, you know, to stop you completing that trial fully.
Yes, we did provide feedback or consultation, and no, we haven't had any response, formal response.
Do we have any more questions? Yeah.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I was wondering if you could provide any overview or flow chart which sets out how enforcement is approached at your group.
Yes, I have provided a flow chart for the purposes of this meeting. I can briefly talk to that flow chart of how an account arrives at enforcement. Is that what you're requesting? Yes. So the first stage of the recovery process is issuing a council tax bill, which usually goes out in mid-March, the first instalment in April. Should a customer not pay, they're sent a reminder, and then a council tax reminder. So I don't know if you want to count the items of correspondence as we go along. That's number 2. Should they further not pay, they are sent what's known as a final notice, third document. Should they not pay again, they are sent a summons to a local magistrate's court. So that's a 4th item of correspondence. There are very few defences against non-payment of council tax, but that hearing is held at local magistrate's court. I can report that the courts are now open following the COVID pandemic. After the liability order is obtained, a request for information is sent to the customer to provide their work details and national insurance number and all those other details, and hopefully seek an offer of payment. Should that not be forthcoming, if we don't have any further contact, at that stage, the council has a number of recovery options open to it, and depending on its particular case, we already hold work details, we can set up an attachment of earnings order or attachment of benefits. But the majority of cases at that stage will then pass to the enforcement. So enforcement, what we consider to be enforcement, is passing it to enforcement agents to collect the outstanding amount. Now, it's ARP. We do have our own enforcement agency. So that's ARPE, Anglia Revenues Partnership Agency. So we employ 7 enforcement agents ourselves. They're fully fledged enforcement agents with their own vans, body cams, fully certified enforcement agents. But before the enforcement agents set foot out of the door, there's another letter called a notice of enforcement that we are required to send to the customer, and that attracts a further charge of £75. So all these items of correspondence have gone forward. We ourselves have use a product called Sell Solutions, which is a triple touch campaign that if we have customer contact details, we then contact them by text message, email, and automated telephone call prior to the enforcement agent actually visiting the property. So they've got another chance there to get in touch with us. And then it's a sanction of last resort is the enforcement agent actually drives out to the property and goes down the garden path and knocks on the door. As soon as they do that, further charges are incurred. So the enforcement agent's job is to distrain upon goods to the value of the debt. So they go through a process known as marking up. So they enter into negotiation on the doorstep with the customer, with the threat of removing goods if the payment isn't forthcoming or paid in full. Now, the actual removal of goods, I hesitate to say it's a public meeting, the actual removal of goods is a very rare occurrence. I can't stress that enough. In most cases, some payment arrangement is agreed with the customer, and then it's managed by the team back in the office or the enforcement agent themselves. Now, should the enforcement agent be unsuccessful, he can then, or he or she can then return the account back to ourselves, Anglia Revenues Partnership, and then we have various options. We don't currently do committal proceedings. That's where somebody can be sent to prison for non-payment of council tax. We don't do that at the moment, but we do bankruptcy proceedings and charging order proceedings. And that's done by the further recovery team, which I've made mention to in the report. The very last resort, of course, if it becomes impractical or if there's a reason why we can't collect the debt, say somebody's died or become very bankrupt, the final thing is to write the debt off. But we don't write the debts off until all avenues have been explored appropriately. Does that help?
Council's here. You said it goes to a magistrate's court, so that's different to a county court judgment?
Yes. When council tax was set up, it was set up and designed primary legislation to go through magistrates' court. So there's very few debts actually go through a magistrates' court. Things like television licenses, fare dodging on the trains, and council tax, they go through magistrates' court, not the county court.
And the other question, the time frame, I mean, each case is on its own merits, quite naturally.
Yeah.
But roughly the time frame from issuing the council tax to when enforcement procedure would, say, come to a concluded end, the end product that you mentioned.
Right. So the bill goes out in March. So the first instalment's on the 1st of April. If they haven't paid the first instalment, worst case scenario, a reminder would go the back end of April, summons back end of May, liability order in June. So we're actually at our busiest time at the moment. And then a few weeks later, so June, July, passed on to the enforcement agent. So April to July.
Thank you.
Councillor Hay.
You mentioned the last stage would be you would write the debt off. What's to stop people continually not paying and continually having their debt written off?
Well, prior to any debt being submitted for write-off, every conceivable action is taken against them. We're bound by legislation. There's nothing to stop debts from a number of years being written off for one particular individual if the circumstance is met. However, the ultimate decision falls within Fenland Council themselves. We have write-off procedures, and the larger amounts do get passed back to the council to be decided.
Anyone else got any questions?
I take it, I think you've said that the enforcement agents require a court order. What powers do they have, and about when there's a genuine case of hardship? And secondly, what about the vacant properties which have been abandoned or seemingly so?
Yeah, right. What powers do they have? They don't have power to force entry. They only have power to, in effect, knock on the door. So their powers are limited. It's not like the TV programs that, you know, don't pay, take it away. It's not like that. There's no power of entry. So they can't force their way into somebody's home. The best item to take is somebody's car, which is sat on the drive. So that's the powers that they have. Vulnerability. I would argue that because we employ our own enforcement agents rather than passing it off to a national firm of enforcement agents, we have a lot tighter control over our enforcement agents. They're fully certified and fully trained to pick up on the areas of vulnerability. There are rules regarding vulnerable customers, and vulnerability isn't specifically defined. However, if somebody's showing that they are disabled or elderly, quite often these facts aren't known until we have somebody actually stood on the doorstep and they can see that it's a disabled car or an elderly customer. At that stage, they can use their own discretion and return the case to ourselves. Empty properties, they're dealt with within the council tax team. So if we have a long-term empty property, we do work closely with the councils in identifying these. But on the council tax records, they are shown as empty. Now, there is a financial incentive for the councils and ourselves called New Homes Bonus, which is a government scheme that comes across. So if we identify an empty property and then we find out somebody's living in it, it's the equivalent of a new property being built in the district. And there is a financial kickback from central government of identifying and having new homes in a region. So we go to great lengths to identify empty properties. Well, the empty properties are there, and we go to great lengths to establish if people are actually occupying those properties. As we move forward, technologies and intelligence improves, we can instruct data houses to find out if somebody is actually resident in a property. So that's an area we're looking into moving forward.
Councillor Bennett?
Hi, back to empty properties or unoccupied properties. What is the procedure for bringing back into use? Let's say property has been abandoned for a long time and then has recently been either purchased at auction or being reoccupied. And in this particular case, I'm asking if this property was previously deleted by the VOA, how do you then bring these properties back into establish new accounts and start charging council tax? So how do you determine when the occupiers moved in, and how do you work out a new bill for a property that's been deleted?
Right, okay. The first thing, the process of bringing empty derelict properties back into use, that doesn't fall within ourselves. We're revenues and benefits, so we're there for the collection. What do we do once we have the information? We receive information from a number of sources that property may be occupied. Mostly people contact us to register themselves that hello, I'm living in this property. We have close links with our partner councils, quite often, what's the first thing people do when they move into a property? They ask for the bin emptying. So that information then comes across to ourselves, and we can charge them for council tax. Bringing it back, if a valuation office agency has taken the property out because it's derelict, well, just a note on that, a property has to be really derelict for it to be taken out of the list, not in need of repair. It has to be absolutely a wreck of a property before the valuation office take it out of use. No longer fit for habitation, but past that. So we're talking about missing roof, missing wall, or something of that nature. So if somebody does happen to get a wreck of a property and do it up, you know, we are sort of trusting that they do get in touch with us via the various means. There isn't an absolute fail-safe. You know, if the property's in the middle of the countryside somewhere and somebody was to build it up. So we are reliant on intelligence that we receive. However, for new properties, we do have contact with planning departments and licensing departments. So if a new property was required, or an old property to be completely refurbished required planning permission, we do have contacts with the planning department to recognise those properties and to bring them to the list.
Councillor Nawaz.
Thank you. Just wondering, because there are more and more tenanted properties these days, and a lot of these letting agencies and so on, with a quick turnover of tenants. So how long does it take you to reach the stage from first receiving the tenancy agreement to sending out the demand notices to those tenants? And what, if I may just add a little bit, what happens if there's a quick turnover of tenants and the tenant has actually left, say 2, 3, 4 weeks later, before you've been able to generate the bill?
Yeah, I mean, wind back to the start, landlords, and if they choose to use letting agents, an agent on their behalf, they have a legal obligation to tell us who's living in their property. So we do have it where there's a quick turnover of tenants, and you know, we have to launch investigation. How long does it take us to update our records once we receive notification? Well, we've started an online automated process to do that in many circumstances. It's that week, doesn't it?
Yeah, the moves are on average sort of processed within a couple of weeks, up to 4 weeks, depending on the information that we need. And we have started doing some automation, so 20% of the moves that are notified online are now automated, so they're processed in 1 day. And we're working to improve that as well.
And a further point for that is if it's a high transient area of people moving in and out, I don't want to make any sweeping statements here, but we are connected to the benefit records as well. So if somebody moves into a property and makes a claim for benefits, we're notified by benefits.
Councillor Gowler.
Thanks. Just looking at the fraud figures, they're quite significant actually. How is, obviously this is fraud identified, how is fraud identified, and are there figures available on what you suspect isn't identified? Now, I'm talking about known unknowns and unknown unknowns, but thank you.
Yeah, so we're moving into Donald Rumsfeld there. How is fraud identified? The main fraud that we identified is single person discount. So in council tax, if you live on your own, you receive a 25% discount. This is the most widely abused discount in all of the public sector. Quite often somebody's living there, they have the partner there, or they say that they live with the mum and dad and they're actually with the partner. So that's a widely abused. How do we find it? We employ credit reference agencies to identify these cases. And then once we get notification that we think something's amiss, we then launch our own investigation, fraud investigation, right to all those concerned. If needs be, interview the people concerned and then make the relevant adjustments. Other frauds that are identified, we do housing tenancy frauds for those authorities that still have their own housing stock. Business rate frauds we pick up on, and LCTS frauds. We work closely with DWP on joint investigations for the benefit ones, and you know we do have quite a lot of success in those areas.
Thank you. I've got a question for you. At paragraph 2.3 of the report, it references the ongoing review and audit to be completed by October 23. Is that still on target? I ask because obviously there have been a lot of staff changes in finance department.
Yes. The answer is our audits, our internal audits are carried out by the members of the audit teams, internal audit teams. So this is pertaining to non-domestic rates. So our non-domestic rates audits are done by East Suffolk Council. So I'm not aware of any staffing issues for East Suffolk Council. Fenland internal audit team audit our enforcement team that we were discussing previously. Right, we're hoping to get this audit for this is small business rate relief. We're hoping to get it completed by August, September, and not leave it right until October. Last year, we were administering the CARF scheme, COVID Additional Relief Fund, which took up a great deal of resource in administering. So that's the reason why we hadn't finished as previously stated we would do.
And another question I had was at paragraph 2.5, it says there's a reference to a steady increase in business hereditments. Do we have any feel for why we have this? Because it's quite a sudden big increase.
I don't believe there's an overall reason, but I think I put in a written response that there are more buildings as we stand here now than there were 4 years ago. You know, edge of town developments, people generally moving further and further out. So there are more buildings, more homes, and there are more properties. Other factors include sort of farm diversification, where a lot of farms seem to have little tea shops and play gyms on on the side. Large properties are often split. You know, if you imagine this building, if it ever got converted, you know, you might have a few shops or whatnot within it. And the other factor which has affected sort of East Anglia generally is holiday lets. People are using second homes. Unscrupulous second home owners have been registering their second home as a holiday let because they actually don't have to pay any business rates if it's a small business, but they avoid the second home council tax charge. However, this has been combated by changing legislation, which has come into effect from the 1st of April this year, that in order to be registered for a holiday let, it has to be available for let for 140 days a year, 20 weeks, and it has to be actually let for 70 days in the 12 months. So that legislation has been brought out to combat that. So I think the main reason is that it's just more buildings. More buildings.
Councillor Booth.
Thank you, Chair. Yesterday, I was looking at the last time that you presented to us. It was actually December 2021, so it's a bit more than an annual review this time. But I did look at some of the comments that I've made at that point around complaint handling. I noticed this report doesn't really contain any information regarding complaints. At the time, you said you were going to be doing a review of complaint handling, and I just wondered, you know, what was the result of that review, and is there any information you can share with it? And also, can you ensure you provide that information, consistent information, on an ongoing basis?
yeah, we do monitor complaints and report to OIB quarterly on those, and to our customer strategy teams, which there's representatives across the whole partnership. And we review them, look at lessons learned, the reasons and the outcomes. And we've actually got a working group at the moment trying to align the process across the partnership as well, to make sure that we are all recording and reporting consistently on those as well.
I think the reason the discussion started last time was that you'd only reported 2 complaints against 17,000 enforcement cases, which my view was that was a little low, and it indicated possibly that you weren't actually recording complaints correctly. So I just wonder, has that situation improved, and are we being proactive in recording complaints and, you know, learning lessons where appropriate? Obviously, it needs to be stated that complaints aren't always validated, i.e. that there isn't always a valid reason for a complaint, but because it's an emotive subject, council tax, I'm sure there must be a high number of people complaining about what's happening.
The complaints that I was talking about are the complaints that are coming in through the host authorities. The enforcement agency themselves have a separate complaints process. I think you've been working on that recently, haven't you, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit double handling. We have our own complaints process for the enforcement team, which we've just brought back through for recommendation. However, enforcement complaints do also go through the host authority complaints procedure. So they actually are subject to two different complaints procedure. It's because we're a member of a national trade body of enforcement agents. They said, we recommend that you have your own complaints procedure specific for enforcement agents. Our complaints, as Lorraine's said, we do a breakdown on a quarterly basis and provide it to OIB. And it breaks down the complaints, what areas they are, and whether or not we feel they're well-founded or not. So yes, we do analyse complaints, and we have got stats to back that up.
Are there any further questions?
Sorry, back to the question about the single occupancy discount.
Yeah.
How is there a period of time for someone to have, say, a lodger or a partner living with them before that kicks in? And if the partner or lodger has a property of their own and they spend, say, a few nights a week there, do they still have to register for the, or declare their partner as living with them?
Right. The legislation is Local Government Finance Act 1992, Section 6, and it boils down to sole or main residence. That's all it says in legislation, sole or main residence. So is that property that person's sole residence? So most of us only have one house, or main residence if you have more than one property. So factors to determine somebody's main residence include, do they own it? Are they in a relationship with the people who live there? Are the doctors and dentists nearby? How many nights a week do they spend there? So if you have a lodger in the property that has got their main residence elsewhere and staying Monday to Friday in a property, but then goes home at the weekend, I would say the home address is the main residence, not where they're lodging. But each case has to be decided on its own merits. Now, under inland revenue regulations, when they're determining somebody's residence, it's a lot closely defined, and it's actually a number of days, number of nights spent on the property. But I don't know if it's done on purpose or not. For council tax, it all rests an occupier of a property, somebody aged over 18 and whose sole or main residence is in that property. And through tribunals and court cases, we've reached a position that we have an understanding what we consider. But again, we have to consider each case on its merits.
You reached, how do you consider it? I didn't catch that part.
Wait, what our understanding, if you give me a scenario where somebody works away Monday to Friday and then goes home at the weekend, I would consider their main residence is the home address, not where they work, not where they stay Monday to Friday. So you can have a situation where they spend more time, more nights away from home but we'll still consider their main residence the weekend house. And that's because they'll have security tenure at the main house, whereas if they're just a lodger somewhere, they're just living there under license.
Which doesn't answer my question. If someone's registered on the voters roll at a property, and then they work away somewhere else, and they spend the weekend where they were at a different property, but not where they registered. So which one would you consider as their main residence?
Right. If somebody works away, has a house, then comes to March, is working in the local factory Monday to Friday, and then goes home at the weekend, I would say that their weekend home, especially if they own the weekend home, I would say that's their main residence. If they don't own the weekend home, if they don't have much connection there, it just depends. It depends on the circumstance. But we need to make a decision on that.
I'll look at that for now. Thank you.
Councillor Booth.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at 4.19, the alternative fuel payments, where people could get payments of £200. And you're saying that, I think the time writing the report, it's just over 60,000 you paid. I think by my rough calculations, it's only about a quarter of eligible people claimed. Is that correct?
Yes, there has been quite low take up. I think the estimated eligible numbers that the government gave us were just that, an estimate. And we have seen much lower take up. We have been a pilot in both the energy bill support scheme and the alternative fuel payment. So we've been working really closely with the government on it. And part of that has been to try and encourage take up. So we've been doing a lot of publicity with park homes, care homes, to try and increase that take up. And we were working with the government to look at what types of publicity we're working. It's been really difficult to reach some of those cohorts and get that take up. The other thing to bear in mind is that it's a two-stage application. So the application itself goes directly to the government. They do some initial checks. They probably filter out about 30% before they come through to the local authority for the secondary checks. So we're not seeing all of the applications.
A supplementary to that, because I was contacted by a resident who was trying to make a claim against that. I think they were advised that their application had been lost in the system and they should therefore make a second claim, which they duly did. And they were then told by someone else that because they'd made two claims, it was all null and void because they were trying to claim too much, even though they'd followed instructions. So I think there might be, with all these checks and balances, some issues with people actually getting this payment, which is overcomplicating the whole issue. Obviously, the scheme's actually finished now, but I'm just wondering, what lessons can be learned from that going forward? Because if people are being told one thing, they're following the instructions, and then being penalised for it, then that's not right.
Yeah, those applications and that whole process and the system is all been set up by Bay's government department. And they do the checks that filter out people if they've already made a claim. So they're checking for duplicates. So that all happens before it reaches the local authority. Saying that, we are working very closely with them to sort of we have been all the way through, identified some areas where there's been a bit of a loophole, and they've immediately sort of put something in place to try and resolve that. And we have actually next week, we've instigated it ourselves. We're going to have some lessons learned sessions with the government and look back and at what could be done better if they were to do a similar scheme in the future.
Okay, thank you.
I think part of the problem is I'm on oil and I applied for the alternative fuel payment. When I didn't hear, I tried contacting ARP, couldn't find a number. Because I'm a member, I contacted member services. They rang ARP and somebody from ARP rang me. And it boiled down to the fact the oil company I use gives you a delivery note when they deliver that clearly has the price you paid, clearly has your name and address on. And I was told that was not sufficient. I needed an invoice. I then had to go back to the company. They never issue invoices because I pay before it's delivered. And that acts as my invoice. I had to go back to the company. Lucky enough, we know the owner of the company. and he provided me with invoices. But if other people are getting this same thing, I haven't been contacted by ARP to say the paperwork is not correct, we can't pay out. As I say, if I didn't have the contacts through member services, I might still be waiting.
I respond to that. It's a government scheme. They've set up their own national call centre. So all of the calls have to be directed through the national call centre, which is why we don't advertise a number to come through to ARP. And with regards to the delivery notes, invoices and receipts, we've had numerous meetings with, as a pilot, sort of explaining the types of evidence that we're receiving, asking for some discretion, because there was 5 very set criteria that they had to reach. And we've done a lot of work to try and sort of work through that. But yeah, there are 5 set criteria that have to be met, and that receipt that we ask for as per the government guidance, if it doesn't meet those 5 criteria, we then have to cancel it, cancel the claim. And again, notifications don't come from us, they come from the government. So it is quite a sort of a joined up approach, and a lot of it we don't have that sort of control over.
Councillor Booth?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, the situation explained to me was quite similar to what Councillor Hayes given. I think that the big issue that these people had was they were trying to speak to someone about it, and they were being sent around the houses, couldn't get anyone to sort of take ownership. I think they finally got through to people, and that's when they were told, "Oh no, you've done it twice. That's why you know your application's rejected." But you know, I think it's a classic example of government setting rules at Whitehall or in London and not actually knowing how it works on the ground practically, with particularly with oil, because you know there's a lot of houses in this area where we use oil, and I think they just don't appreciate how that works in practice.
We were able to sort of have some influence and help shape that process throughout, like the piloting scheme, and we did point out a lot of these things, like the anomalies and the types of things that we were seeing, and the types of claims we were seeing. So we did manage to sort of to change some of those things and get some FAQs issued for other local authorities as well. But what I would say, if you've got any cases that haven't been paid, although the scheme has closed, the date for final payment has not been reached yet. So if you've got any examples of people who have had difficulties trying to get their evidence or submit a claim, if you can let me know, then I'm happy to take that forward.
Councillor White?
Thank you. Just one quick question following on from Councillor Boone's question. Do you actually get cases of multiple applications which could be classified as fraudulent, particularly in different sort of RPs? Do different RPs talk to each other?
For the energy?
For anything?
Yeah,
Any of the benefits, could be housing benefit?
Yeah, there's a lot of checks in place in all benefits we decide. We have fraud risk assessments. For the energy bills specifically, there's duplicate checks at the Bay side. We then undertake duplicate checks when we're processing them. When we pass the file across to the finance teams to make the payment, they then check again for duplicates. So there's like 3-stage checks for duplicate claims in that scheme alone, as well as a 10% check on every claim that's processed. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's similar across the other benefits that we administer.
Thank you.
Is that all the questions? Thank you. I would just like to say that despite the little hiccup we're hearing about this particular area of benefit, that generally speaking, I mean, I think the benefits team have done an absolutely fantastic job of making sure that all the money that could go out to people has gone out to people. I just think it would be nice to have it noted in this meeting. Okay, so if everyone is okay, if nobody else has any more questions, the update is noted. I'd like to thank you, the panel, for attending. Councillor.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree with noting the update, but I think maybe an action that we can take forward, just regarding my point about the last meeting is when, you know, regular attendees come before this meeting, that they have a look at the minutes of the previous meeting and look at what the discussions were, because I think that's where, you know, we can keep track of what's actually happening. And obviously I know there's a lot of new members here now. It's going to be useful if you do read the previous minutes, because you'll know, you know, what's been discussed at previous meetings and where issues have been identified in the past.
Thank you, councillor Booth. We can note that in the minutes. Thank you. Thank you very much. Just have a slight delay now while we get another team that are actually sitting in one of the other rooms. The next item on the agenda can be found at pages 29 to 66 of the agenda pack, and sets out how the Fenland Community Safety Partnership identifies their priorities for Fenland and provides an up-to-date performance picture for 2022-23, including in relation to CCTV services. I'd like to welcome the panel that's here for us today, and I think probably the easiest thing, as we did before, if you will just all introduce yourselves, that would be good.
Yeah, Alan Bowden, the Community Safety and Partnership Officer.
Hi there, Dan Horn, Assistant Director at Fenland District Council.
Councillor Susan Walworth, Portfolio Holder.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Inspector Andy Morris from Cambridgeshire Police.
Has everybody looked at the presentation that was going to be given today? Does anybody want that presentation done now, or are we happy to go straight to questions to the panel? Questions? Right, so who would like to go first then? Councillor Hay.
Yeah, I've got a question about e-scooters. The bane of my life. I nearly ran somebody over who, as I was pulling out, rode one directly in front of me on the pavement. What's been done to get the message out that e-scooters are illegal, used on public highways, unless they're part of a scheme within the inner cities? People don't always, they're not always aware that perhaps they're breaking the law. You know, and how can we improve getting this message out?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Press that on that. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for your question. E-scooters certainly present a challenge, more so given the recent incident in Cardiff that's currently being investigated by the IOPC now, which again leaves us with our tactical options. We have to think very, very carefully how we address these. We always have to weigh up the risk that they pose against what we're going to address. Certainly in Fenland, we use the 4E approach in terms of encourage and explain to individuals that they're illegal, and then we'll encourage before we enforce. That said, we've got ObScoot, which is an operation that we work closely with our preventions hub our partnership and preventions hub in exactly that, the communications around e-scooters, because it's a constant challenge to address retailers, manufacturers, insurance companies, schools, the public, the users, the parents. So through the prevention hub, we're doing a lot of work with the wider challenges that we face, the more national challenges around the insurance companies locally, and certainly in Fenland. I'm a big advocate of our Safer Schools officer. He repeatedly gives presentations in schools about e-scooters, and we actually had one school who was encouraging the use of e-scooters as a safe means of transport. That was quickly nipped in the bud, and work was done there to cease that happening. So it is a constant battle, but statistically in Fenland, we are the safest of the 6 district areas across the force around how many road traffic collisions we've had with e-scooters, and also how many of these e-scooters have been used in crime. I'm not naive to say that that's wholly accurate, but I can only go on the data that I have, and actually the number is very low compared to the other areas. I'm also acutely aware that in Cambridge City it's legal, so we have that challenge as well. E-scooters, I'm sure further down the line legislatively will be made legal to use, but that's an issue for the government, NPCC, the National Police Chiefs Council, and the Department for Transport to address. I don't think it's coming anytime soon, but I think sooner rather than later they will be legal. But in the meantime, I'd certainly expect any of my officers not to turn a blind eye unless they're dealing with something that presents a greater risk and they need to get to that sooner. And then, of course, if that's the case, they'll have my support. But we will always look to encourage and explain. We do have a database that both the neighbourhood policing teams use to log who they've spoke to. So actually, if we come across somebody who's already been spoken to, then we'll look to deal with them a little bit more punitively. And in Fenland, we have had more seizures of e-scooters than any other district area as well. So in essence, from what we're doing about it, we're doing as much as we can in terms of education and enforcement. But in terms of awareness, yeah, we have corporate communication campaigns that go out probably quarterly, because it's something we just have to keep on doing, because whilst we're working with the retailers, and I won't name names, clearly they're still going to carry on selling them because it's not illegal to do so. But I think those that are purchasing these scooters, some are naive to the fact that they can only be used on private land unless they're of an adult with a driving licence and insurance.
Councillor Hay. Thank you for that reply. I would also say Chatteris, where I'm a member, we have a problem with off-road bikes.
Yeah.
I live in a small cul-de-sac. There's a byway next to me, and only the other day I saw a young lad on an off-road bike come out onto the highway, followed by presumably his parents in a red car behind them, clearly breaking the law. I don't think he even had a helmet on. We get quite a number of these within Chatteris. Obviously, when they don't have number plates on, it's very difficult to ring the police and say we've seen this, because it's past.
Yeah, of course. And again, I go back to how we deal with off-road bikes. Tactics to deal with off-road bikes are quite challenging, because unless there is an immediate risk to life that we're made aware of, it's very difficult for us to pursue, because the flip side of pursuing somebody on an off-road bike and the consequences of doing so, I'll be honest, are greater than the initial threat we dealt with. So it's very challenging, and we've got a problem-solving plan in place for that very issue you've talked about in Chatteris, in working with the community, working with the problem-solving group as well to identify those who are involved, and working with the schools as well, because I've no doubt that some of these people are coming from local education. So our Safer Schools officer is very much on the case there, as are the March neighbourhood policing team. I could just encourage you, it's really, really important, if you can on our behalf, is to encourage your constituents to report the matter as well, because although we might not be able to do anything there and then, if I was to look at data and say, actually, we've had 30 calls for service in the last 10 days about these bikes, there's a real problem here. And what that would help me do is go to the wider organisation, get support from our rural community action team, get support from the road policing units, get support from our Vision Zero team, who are focused solely on casualty reduction. So there is a wider network of resources available to me. but simply it has to be backed up by data. And I constantly say this to people, please call it in, because you mustn't think that if you call it in and you don't get a response, nothing is going to happen. Something will happen, because and I've got Sergeant Arnold here, we regularly review calls for service. We meet every week and we discuss the issues. And sometimes what we're being told by the community to what's in front of us is very, very different. So it's really challenging to justify putting resources in if we're not getting the calls for service.
Councillor Booth.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll speak about my topic that I normally raise each time, which I'm sure Dan knows, which is about road safety. And actually, what I want to say is thank you to the police, particularly Sergeant Arnold and the Wisbech team, because we've seen a marked increase in the amount of police enforcement checks being undertaken in the rural areas. It's only taken about 10 years to get there, but it is starting to have an effect, and the support they're giving the Community Speed Watch is great. And I think this is where we should have been years ago, to be quite honest. I guess what I would like to hear is assurances that we're going to carry on with this sort of strategy that we've now got in place. I mean, I was in Gaia last Monday, and police came along and did checks. Well, we were at one end of the village, they were at the other end, and it is a strategy that is starting to work, and we can see it in our figures with less people speeding, and we're the non-enforcement side of it. So yeah, if they're willing to do it from that perspective, then I think it is a good story. So can we have assurances that that's going to carry on? I mean, I think you've trained up most of the Wisbech staff now to use speed guns, haven't you? So that
yeah, certainly every member of the neighbourhood policing team is now trained to use the speed guns, the laser equipment that we use, and I think that's got to be a bare minimum, that people have got the tools to do the job. And firstly, thank you for that recognition, and certainly that will be fed back. So as from October last year, part of our neighbourhood policing strategies, we set quarterly community engagement priorities, and we have 3 of those: 3 for the March sector, 3 for the Wisbech sector, and that quite simply is based upon what the community is saying. These are the issues, these are what we want you to address, and it would be silly of me not to look at that feedback and act upon it. And for the last 3 quarters since we've done it, October to December, January to March, and now April through to June, every sector, every quarter, speeding comes about. So a lot of the time, focus and resources is spent on speeding enforcement. And yeah, when you look at what we've done, the team in they've done over 400 hours of speed enforcement since the turn of the year. They've reported over 100 drivers for summons because actually they're not suitable to be dealt with by fixed penalty notice, and they've issued over I think over 200 fixed penalty notices as well. So certainly every member of staff now has that personal responsibility and responsibility to the public to address that. So yeah, from my perspective, absolutely it will carry on, and what we can do to support that Vision Zero, then absolutely we'll carry on with the speed enforcement. So it's really pleasing to hear that that's been reciprocated well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Barber.
There's been a marked increase in antisocial behaviour in the villages around Wisbech in the last couple of months. I know some of the police force are coming next week to do a talk at Leverington, but apart from the talks, is there anything actually happening to try and stop this, mostly with the young people?
Yeah, again, I refer back to the point around the Leverington issue was highlighted to me that it's escalating about 2 months ago now. So I asked PS Arnold to commission firstly a problem solving plan. Now, the purpose of the problem solving plan is to understand the scale of the issue that we're facing, and part of that plan is to do significant research into the issue, into the offenders, into the calls for service, into the feedback we're getting from the community to really understand what's going on. And I think it reiterates to what was being said earlier around the off-road biking and the antisocial behaviour there. So yes, this is one of our priorities to be on the villages around Wisbech as well, to tackle the ASB. I've got the Safer Schools Officer, PC McGarvey, doing work with the schools, going in to speak to them. We're looking at holding a meeting with those that are identified as well, to first and foremost to understand the reasons why, because I've dealt with similar issues in the past where sometimes funding bids have been productive for young people to get them to, because a lot of this does boil down to boredom, but actually if there's that criminal intent to do things, then we'll deal with that wholly different. But if there's an issue that actually we can support as a wider problem solving group with and help them put things into place in the community to curb that boredom, to reduce that risk of them causing this ASB, we'll do that. So certainly we're deploying resources at the moment. I've actually about 3 weeks ago, we've got a dedicated special constable committed to Leverington to provide that support as well. So when the team are not on duty, the Wisbech team, then he'll go out, and also there's a crossover now for both. If there's a significant issue in Wisbech and the March team are on duty, they'll come over, and vice versa as well. So we're just looking at, I'm looking at using what I've got a little bit more effectively to tackle the issue, but certainly I should be in Leverington myself next week as well to explain a bit more. No problem.
Councillor Gerstner.
Thank you. 2 questions really, and in the report pack we had here, and it said, you said we did, and there's quite a comprehensive thing here about the e-scooter campaign, about the school which was identified as encouraging e-scooters to come along. I think we know in Whittlesea what school that was.
Yeah, potentially.
So yes, I feel sympathetic for the police in that until government legislation is made much clearer throughout England and Wales for police forces, then you have a very difficult position to be in. That said, I know we always say things like this, but we're waiting for an accident to happen. And unfortunately, it's not until that does happen that things will start to ramp up a little bit. I also understand greatly the resources you have available for these things. I've been chairman of the neighbourhood watching Whittlesea for 14 years. So I've seen quite a few sergeants and inspectors go through the system, okay? The second question is, moving on from the antisocial behaviour side of things. Perpetrators in Whittlesea, and I'm just talking about Whittlesea here, which I know what time the neighbourhood police work. And we did ask at our town council meeting whether there could be funding available to extend those hours, not every day, but just on an ad hoc basis, especially during the summer months when people congregate well after 8 o'clock at night. I know it's a difficult decision to make, but I'm just asking if it can be considered, because of, as the summer months come along, and I'm not blaming any one group of people, but our antisocial behaviour and damage does ramp up quite a bit.
Yeah, and I appreciate your feedback there. There's certainly provisions that I'm aware of under the Police Act around where local authorities can make applications in terms of funding. That's not something I'd necessarily consider to be a long-term fix. I've got Chris with me here, and we only spoke last week about in our meeting that I want the team to be considering changing their hours during the summer, because for that exact reason, that ASB is going to increase during the evenings, and I want more of a visible presence in the towns. And that's not just for the March sector, but that's for the Wisbech sector as well. Of course, I have to offset that against their balance with their home and personal life, but certainly that's something we spoke, that very thing about changing hours and being more flexible to the demand, that I absolutely recognise that boredom will breed some antisocial behaviour. We've got more of an understanding of who these individuals are in Whittlesea, and we're working with some of those individuals, some of the parents as well, to look at those who are causing us slightly more harm in terms of putting antisocial behaviour contracts in place as well, to just manage their behaviour during the summer months. But my expectation would be that the team are flexible to the demand that's facing the community during the summer months, and yeah, I absolutely support that as well. No problem.
Notwithstanding that Councillor Booth's very pleased with what's going on in Guyherne and around there, some of the other villages are not actually getting the speed checks that we would like to see. We can, a lot of them have MBAS cameras, and they can provide some sort of data.
Great.
So, I mean, do you have plans to I mean, I know obviously you've done a concentration there. Do you have any plans for moving around the villages?
Yeah, we absolutely do, and without banging the same drum of the resources I've got against that demand, it's got to be intelligence led. So if I'm getting that information that we've got a real issue here, feed it up to me, and there's no complexity to the process. You drop me an email and say these are the times. I'll put the officers in during that time when they're on duty. So if you've got certain parishes that are feeling neglected and want that attention, just let me know and I'll make sure that happens. Okay.
Thank you. Continuing on the theme of speeding, are the cameras actually monitored and acted upon on the A605 leading into and out of Whittlesea? I have personally experienced during the last election campaign, people driving past through Coates in particular and East Street at such a frightening speed, you actually feel scared walking on the footpath. I'm sure you're aware of it, and you have had a number of engagements as well, or your department has. Is there anything you can do to make that part of the A605 safer, particularly given that there is also a primary school adjacent to the road?
As I
And there
understand
also-
it, that stretch of road is a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. Is it the 30 that then turns into a 40?
No, my point is that it's never observed
By the camera or by police?
by the drivers. So I suspect if police were seen to be more vigilant and active, then probably the drivers would take more notice.
Yeah. Again, in relation to the camera itself, are you referring to a static speed camera?
Well, we have, when you enter into Whittlesea, there is one just by the stand ground fire station roundabout. And then there's further one on where there's the welcome to Fenland.
Are you talking speed cameras or ANPR automatic?
No, speed cameras.
Right, okay.
And they are actually speed cameras.
Right.
I know because my car bleeps when there's a speed camera coming. So are they actually enforced?
The cameras themselves?
Yes.
That's something I can't answer that question to. I don't know, because that's completely different. The cameras themselves are, as I understand it, are commissioned through highway. So I don't know about that. I can talk to you about the resources and about getting officers down to Coates, and I can give you actual data because we record every village every time we carry a speed enforcement check. So I can provide you with some data about what we have done, and again, I can only promise to look at that area when the team are on duty against other competing demands. But I do know that sector itself. I have family who live in Turves, and I've observed it myself many times. Vehicles going extremely fast down that stretch of road. So certainly in terms of providing resources, that's something I can speak with Chris about. But we have to get across all the parishes. But yeah, certainly I'm happy to have a look at that as well.
Thank you. I look forward to that.
Problem. What I will say, just like some in terms of the speeding, is that Fenland statistically for the last year, it had the lowest number of slight injury road traffic collisions. It had 92. The lowest across the 6 districts for serious accidents, had 31, and it was the 3rd lowest for fatal. We had 8 fatal collisions in Fenland last year, but the majority of those can be contributed to the A47 and A141, and it had the lowest overall total of 131 road traffic collisions compared to the 6 other districts. So certainly the speed enforcement we do when we can, I would like to contribute to those numbers in some way.
Thank you. Councillor Seneca.
Just to follow on from Hack's point, I can confirm the 2 speed cameras in Whittlesea, as you're entering from that direction, they do work. You can actually find data online that tells you the month, how many fines are issued. The cameras that you're talking about in the villages are just flashing, I don't know the correct term, the flashing speed. They just tell you what speed you're doing. And I have witnessed people going above the speed limit of 30 and 40 along there. So I wonder if the flashing speed limit cameras are doing, enough to deter speed.
Yeah, I think they're the speed detection recorders, aren't they? I think that's what the official name for them is. So certainly they provide an indication as well. But again, if we're looking at speed detection recorders for coach, maybe it's something we can speak to our Vision Zero team about how we get them installed as well. So thank you.
Councillor Gerstner.
Thank you. Staying on the speed cameras. The Police and Crime Commissioner funded 3 speed camera vans, mainly for Cambridgeshire.
Yeah.
Do you have a joined up approach with them at all as far as speeding issues and identifying areas of concern? Because they surely must get the feed. We feed back to the Speed Watch team at Cambridgeshire all the data that's taken off the M values.
Yeah, we do. That's the Vision Zero team that I alluded to earlier from the Police and Crime Commissioner. So the Vision Zero campaign, for those who are not aware, is a campaign by the PCC to have 0 fatalities by 2040. So yeah, we have access to those resources and those vans. They were only in Fenland last week as well. So yeah, they're across the whole constabulary area. And again, it's something for us. We feed into them. I'd probably say more so than other districts because they're relatively new, but we're on the ball from when they were funded and they came live. So we've got a dedicated special resource, dedicated police constable resource who we have regular contact with about deployment. So again, that's something that we can use if the team are not on duty or we have other competing demands that we need to focus on. So yeah, the Vision Zero, we're linked in with that. So thank you.
Councillor Gower.
Thank you. I've got 2 questions, if it's okay. I'll do one at once. The first question is about CCTV. So I'm looking at the statistics at the bottom of this presentation about it. Firstly, we've got minus 653 patrols over a year, which I find a little bit concerning. The other thing I want to mention about it is I represent Charis. We pay a significant amount of money every year to contribute towards this, and we have had meetings where we've discussed what we actually get out of it. And as an example, I'm looking at this. We've got over the space of a year, we've got 6 arrests and fines over a year, and I think from memory, it's about £20,000 we pay. I've actually got a meeting later in the week where I'm visiting. Look, I've been unable to do during COVID, but I'd just like your opinion.
The return on investment in essence. Alan, Dan, is that something you talk about that?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor Gowler. So in terms of the Chatteris Town Council contribution, we did have a catch-up, actually, a meeting with all the Town Council members. I think within the last 12 months, or certainly not long before, to just sort of explain some of the context around how we do the work and what we do. I mean, there's 2 things in terms of incidents spotted and referred on, and then actual convictions at the stage, and that's where we interface and work as one team with the police colleagues on that. We've got a meeting actually this Thursday evening, so I would suggest you come along to that, and because to get into the detail, we're also going to actually offer all our funding partners to come along to a sort of an open event. That's likely to be early autumn, to sort of to come and see what we do and explain how it all interfaces together and links in with police colleagues. I would say it's a good news story for Chatteris that points as a very safe place. And what we do say about the CCTV is that it acts as a deterrent. A lot of what we do, what it does is a deterrent. I think we did have experience, and we're talking some years ago now, before Fenland was really involved in CCT as a council. This was prior to our direct involvement. And CCTV was taken out of one particular town for a period of time, and the incidents went through the roof during that period. because people get to know. And so it's a deterrent factor as much as everything else. So yeah, I would really encourage that. But of course, with any funding partner, we're happy to come along and justify the investment that they make in their towns, because they do invest in specific areas and specific cameras.
Sorry, could you just comment on the minus 653 patrols over the year?
Yeah, I would think it was to do, there was a short period of time for a few weeks where there was an issue which we have on the antenna in March, on the police antenna in March, which led to some patrols in some parts of the county couldn't be done for that period of time. And I would think that is the reason for it. I'd like to check it though, in terms of that, because the other year, certainly since the shared services come in with Peterborough, performance on patrols has gone up. So I would say that would be the reason, but I would like to check on that, Councillor Gallagher.
I have another question if that's okay. Some of the second questions regarding illegal parking. I definitely have a feeling that, forgive me for saying this, but the police don't take a very high priority on it. I know in Fenland, we've got Councillor French sitting over there that we would like to move towards civil parking enforcement, but obviously until that comes in, if it comes in, I feel we've got a major problem for it. I can certainly speak for Charis, but I see it throughout Fenland. You see it on social media. There's certainly certain areas in Charis where I would consider there is very, very dangerous parking. It's been reported, and I'm afraid to say that I think the impression from the public is that the police just don't care about it. I hope that's not true, but I'd like a little bit of confidence that if things are reported, that we will get action taken on it.
Yeah, thank you. Snippet of the thank you. The snippet of my day sometimes is my first call this morning was a complaint I had to deal with from a businessman in Whittlesea who was complaining that the police were doing too much parking enforcement and it was driving customers away. So we have that challenge of I had to manage his expectations, and that I had to take stock that I was getting my ear bent for the team doing their job. And of course, I think it's widely acknowledged that Fenland don't have the civil enforcement, and that responsibility currently falls on the police. I have to weigh up the competing demands against what I need to prioritise. Certainly the PCSOs that I have in March, Chatteris and Wisbeach, they're certainly more focused on doing the parking enforcement, and I would expect them to be carrying out parking enforcement on every set of duties. And again, it goes back to what I was talking about earlier, our community engagement priorities. We seek feedback from the community through our social media channels, through our engagement with the community themselves to say what's important to them. And parking in Whittlesea was identified as an issue. So we picked that up as one of the issues. In the last engagement survey, it wasn't picked up for Chatteris. So the team are focusing more on Whittlesea because we believe there is more of a problem there. If we get the calls or I get the information that there's a specific issue at a specific location, absolutely, I direct the guys to go down there and do that. But that's on the caveat that if they have to deal with something that presents more of a risk and harm to the community, they'll pick that up as well. And we are doing more as well is trying to educate people about their parking, because some people have to take personal responsibility here. Some people in life will always blame somebody else, and somebody else has to pick up that issue. So if we can do some educational work with the people who are parking like that and explain the impact it's having, then it might just reduce it a little bit. But certainly if you've got a specific area, Councillor Gallagher, that you'd like me to deploy the PCSOs to, I'll be happy to do that.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
No problem.
Councillor Booth.
Thank you, Chair. I was interested to hear the statistics you provided regarding road accidents, because it wasn't that long ago that Fenland was something like the third or second highest for young fatalities because of roadside drains and ditches. So it does appear to have turned round. I believe that's research undertaken by Break, which I don't recall having seen any reports on that lately. So maybe that's something we could try and obtain, because I think that's quite useful. I imagine Vision Zero will be sort of looking at that. So that's just one observation. Another just point I'd like to make is that there's a section there about community engagement. I think last time you were here, I did suggest that maybe you go to like large scale events in the rural communities.
Yeah.
So, for example, Parsons Grove Car Show, shameless plug, will say, you know, we've got that on the date, right, 16th July. The police normally attend anyway throughout that show, but it's a great opportunity to speak to a lot of people from the rural area in one place because the number of people we get there. But there must be other events, so like the Gorefield show that was on recently. You know, that you know, Maney has a big event. So, you know, can you tap into those more to be more engaged with rural communities, because you're going to get more, I guess, be more cost effective to be at those events as opposed to maybe going to, I don't know, an event where you only get half a dozen people. I mean, you've got the population going to be at these big events.
They're coming to us rather than we're going to them.
Absolutely, yeah.
And just to reassure you on that point, only I think it was 2 weeks ago, I picked up that I'm a former operational planner, so I used to work in events planning a good few years ago, but I was picking up that we weren't getting the risk assessments or the operational plans about events, and I was very conscious that we're coming into the peak season for events. So I just commissioned a piece of work a couple of weeks ago to get the events register circulated with the teams and get our duties changed for the summer. So we attended the March Summer Festival a couple of weeks ago, the team at the Chatteris Festival at the weekend. And we will attend as many events as we possibly can. We've got the big March Armed Forces Day coming up in September, where we're expecting about 10,000 people. Really big event, the Wisbech Rock Festival. But you're right that some of the smaller events as well. I know Parsons Drove event has always been well attended. So certainly I'm relying on the information to come into me to be able to then feed the team and say, yeah, go out to these events. It's always an interesting one at events because when the information about the events comes in, they're risk assessed, and they're risk assessed based on the necessity for police to attend. And normally community events don't meet the threshold for police attendance because there's not a risk of crime and disorder, and therefore sometimes the advice is step away. It's the event organiser's responsibility, because there might be a perception that if we're there, we undertake some form of implied liability. So if things go wrong, it's on the police to pick it up. I've turned 360 on that now, and I'm supportive of the team attending these events for that very reason, that actually it's a massive opportunity for us to engage with not only the younger generation, but everybody who's attending those events. And it's been widely documented that in recent years we've lost a large number of police community support officers, and that information flow has dried up substantially. So to attend these public events, you're absolutely right, we're hitting a lot of people en masse. And so yeah, I'm fully supportive of us attending these events, and we're actually in the process at the moment of scanning for the summer events and duty changing the team to attend as much as they can.
Thank you.
No problem.
Can I just pick up on that as well, because in the pack, the presentation, it shows, it talks about community engagement in Wimbledon and Doddington. I don't think anybody knew. I certainly didn't know, and I'm chairman of the parish council and the district councillor. So I don't know how many people they would have seen. They just parked the car, according to this photograph, outside the War Memorial playing field with a police lady standing.
And when was this, sorry?
I don't know when. It doesn't actually give a date in here. It's just giving illustrative pictures.
Yeah.
But I can assure you, no one knew that was a community engagement thing. Otherwise, people would have gone along and actually spoken to them.
Right.
But I agree that it probably is easier to do the bigger events rather than these small ones. But even some of the smaller villages, like Wimbledon, we had a fun day just the other weekend. The footfall there is 800 odd people.
Yeah.
So even if you didn't have any sort of stand, but you just literally had a couple of officers walking around talking to people. You could glean quite a lot.
So I think what's key for me to take forward from this, and for all of us, I guess, is you've got Sergeant Arnold and the other Sergeant Arnold, who look after the two areas, actually to feed that into your smaller parishes meetings, to just scan and talk about events that are upcoming. And then if we've got a little bit of notice, we can ordinarily look to change some people's duties. I hold my hand up, the Doddington Festival this coming weekend, isn't it? The Doddington Festival. Yeah, Doddington Carnival, sorry, we spoke about changing the team's duties this weekend, and it was just too short notice. But again, now we're putting a bit of an infrastructure in place to horizon scan for events. I think we'll be certainly attending more than we have done in the past, that's for sure. Yeah, okay.
Councillor Gerstner?
Thank you. I'd like to say thank you for the enforcement of parking at Woodford Town Council. It comes up quite regularly. It has been a priority in our area, and it's a very emotive subject. Always, you're wrong if you do, and you're wrong if you don't. Perhaps one of your predecessors, Rob Thompson, 15 years ago, had exactly the same situation yourself. You went out and did some enforcement, and then got told off for doing it. I'm sorry, I don't agree with that. I agree with what you're doing. Only this morning, in Woodford, PCSO was going along Market Street, and a proliferation of people ran out their shops, moved their vehicles.
Good.
So
Good.
although the shop owner might be saying they're losing business by, they are also responsible themselves by using up parking spaces that the public can't use. So again, it's a no-win situation. But there has been, and I thank you again, a marked increase in parking enforcement in Whittlesea. And I hope that remains there, because people need to know what the law is. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And that'll be fed back as well. Thank you.
Councillor Booth?
Thank you, Chair. Another question about CCTV. So many years ago, I think I asked Councillor Oliver, when he was portfolio holder, about the possibility of getting CCTVs or mobile CCTVs out to the rural areas. I think in the report you mentioned about another 3 in Wisbech, no mention of CCTVs out in the rural areas. I think at the time they were quoting something like £100,000 to move CCTV, which was a ridiculous amount of funding. Now I realise it needs to be demand led, but sometimes you just need to react to issues. Like, for example, we have got this issue about Leverington. You know, would it help getting some mobile CCTVs in Leverington for a few weeks just to put the focus there? And as you've said, it acts as a deterrent.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and we now have the ability to do it, and much it's still got a cost, but it's a bit more manageable than the quotes you've had clearly previously. So, and we've got an example in Doddington. So Doddington have now got a camera, and they're a funder, and they receive around a play area, and they got a camera installed, and it's due to the Wi-Fi connectivity that we've now got linked to the antenna that I mentioned earlier that did have that issue that I referenced to Councillor Gowler earlier. But nevertheless, you have the ability now as parish council to look at that, and we would encourage all parish councils to take a look and see about whether we can work together on that to either attract funding if there is an issue. And again, the one thing I'll take away, and obviously Andy's mentioned it quite a lot about the need to report incidents in. I think a lot of people get frustrated sometimes about the ability to wait on the phone if they've got to wait for a little bit on the phone. So do the online reporting tool. And I think as an action coming out from this is a lot of people, I know not everybody has got online reporting tool and access to that, so that's fair enough, but a lot of people do. And then it's just as and when you've got a minute in the next couple of days, just log it when it happened, back it through, you get a reference number, and then that feeds through to Andy's team to have a look at the data as and when. And that saves all the hassle, you know, if there is, you know, in terms of frustration, if you're busy to actually spend time on the phone. So That's just one.
And it really does make a difference because the teams will literally daily scan calls for service for our area. And that's not just the ones that have had a policing response, the ones that haven't had a policing response. They're formulated, and Chris and Dave and I, we have a regular debrief of things that are going on, and we set the team's focus on those issues. So it's really important we do get those calls. And also, Chair, I'm reliably informed you will have a PCSO on Saturday at your festival. Okay.
Councillor Booth, did you want to?
Yeah, I've just come back on that. I mean, it was a fairly encouraging result or response. The only bit I was a little bit concerned about is that you're kind of implying that the parish council had to stump the costs. This district council represents the whole area. Over a quarter of the population live in the rural areas. So I'm disappointed that we're saying that you can only get a mobile CCTV, parish council funds it. Surely this district council should be able to fund a mobile CCTV that can go anywhere within the district, including the rural areas.
Yeah, I think that the difficulty is to find the funding as a council for any time where there's lots of demand for new CCTV cameras, which is why we've relied and got a lot of support from councils like the town councils over the years who've paid for cameras, and then we've monitored it. Chatteris is a very good example actually of where that's happened. Doddington had an issue and looked at the funding options ability to do that. So as you know, we've got a tight capital programme, and it's you know, in terms of resources, that all has to be found to do that. The history of the cameras has always been around the town centres, how they formulated initially, and a lot of it was to do with the assets of the council initially, and then it's been expanded into being much more of a tool to tackle crime and disorder over the years, over the history of CCTV. Councillor Warwick has mentioned to me that the police crime commissioner has a...
Yeah, so I met with the police crime commissioner's team a little while ago, just obviously as I took on the portfolio, and they were telling me that they actually have 3 mobile cameras that they're willing to lend us. All we have to do is a simple application. They're only allowed for up to 12 weeks, and ideally it should be things like that need a quick spot. I mean, it's not a long-term response, but things like the antisocial behaviour in Leverton maybe, and other bits and bobs that we've got going on, we can definitely use those. I only had the meeting, so you're going to have to not quote me on anything too yet, but if that's something you'd like me to look into, of course, absolutely, of course.
I mean, that was the point I was going to make. You know, you're talking about parish councils funding it, but often what will happen is it'll be, you know, you get a spate of antisocial behaviour, and then it calms down because those involved, they move on to other things, and it starts relaxing. You know, particularly over the summer holidays, I'm sure we'll all appreciate that's when you tend to see a spike. But it could be we just need a camera that can go round, I'd say, the district to where we've got a hotspot at that moment, and then move it to another location. So that's what I'm suggesting. And I think Leverton is obviously a prime example of what's been said. So
We both just did that then, sorry. Definitely can look into that for you, Councillor Booth, that's no problem. And I'd much rather use someone else's resources than ours. That's what we're supposed to do.
the only issue with that is obviously PCC is looking after the whole of Cambridgeshire. If you've only got 3 cameras, that's quite a lot of call on resources because what's it, 6 districts, isn't there, or councils? So there's going to be competition for it. That's why I think Fenland should probably look at maybe at least 1 mobile camera itself.
We'll go down this route first and see what the competition's like.
All I'll say with that, just link in with Sergeant Arnold for that, because he's got a comprehensive problem-solving plan around issues in Leverton, and there's a lot of information there to suggest that will be quite high up the priority list.
Thank you.
Councillor Hay.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Booth mentioned that Wisbech have got 3 new cameras. Can I just ask, was it Wisbech Town Council that funded those?
Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, so that one was to do with a specific project called Safer Streets 4. So they've had Safer Streets 1, 2, 3 and 4. And I think they're looking to launch Safer Streets 5. So for Safer Streets 4, you have to look at the evidence base across Cambridgeshire. And I think we Alan in particular, looked at the data around Fenland and made the case to the Medworth ward because it was an outlier for Fenland for incidents in Medworth ward, vastly different to anywhere else in Fenland, but also across Cambridgeshire it came up as a spike as well. So made that case for funding, and in the end, Medworth ward was chosen by the police along with 2 other wards in Peterborough. And for Safer Streets for that, as part of that, we made the case that three CCTV cameras would be good as part of a collective bid for a range of actions, which are still ongoing in Wisbech Town at the minute. So it was external funding through the Safer Streets for that received that 3 cameras.
Do we have any more questions?
Just a thought, whenever, back to speeding again, whenever there is a police vehicle checking speeding anywhere, always on social media, someone says, there's a speed camera here. Surely there must be something that we could do about that.
So there's a specific criminal offence of obstructing police if you can evidence that. So in essence, no, you can't. If, for example, somebody was coming out of Leverington and they flashed their vehicle at somebody and that car was doing 38 miles an hour coming into a 30, that person who's flashed their car is committing a criminal offence. If that person coming into Leverington was only doing 30 miles an hour and they got flashed, the person flashing their car wouldn't be committing a criminal offence. So it's all around that actually you've prevented a specific act there and then. It's around legislation. So the social media thing can be frustrating, but we have to look at it upon it's preventative, it's preventing people, it's slowing people down, and they might just protect somebody from getting hit. So yeah, it's for some it's great, for others it's not, but there is specific offences. So for those of you that flash and all motorists, if they're coming in and they're speeding, then you're committing an offence then, but not so much on social media, I'm afraid. But yeah, I'd like to do a lot with a lot of people on social media, but sadly I can't. Yeah.
I'd just like to register on the parking enforcement issue, particularly in March, with the current traffic restrictions we have through the centre of town. There is still an inordinate amount of parking on the stretch between the marketplace and the bridge, which is yellow lined, and I've never seen any enforcement there, but there is always somebody parked there. And with the restrictive traffic flow, it just creates havoc, particularly if any large vehicles are coming through.
Okay, thank you. And I've got Sergeant Arnold in the room, so I'm sure he's taken a note of that to deploy his PCSOs. Thank you, appreciate that. Thank you.
If there are no, I don't think any further questions. No, in which case we need to note the update, but there were a couple of instances that people are going to refer back to. Would it go through you, Amy? Would it be better if that, yeah, so if everyone goes through Amy and then we can distribute it out. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Please feel free to contact me direct, councillors. I'm more than happy to.
Thank you very much. Councillor Booth.
Yeah, Chair. One thing is we've been talking a lot about Vision Zero here today, and obviously they're not in attendance. Maybe that's something we need to look at, particularly around road safety, or get them to come along to this, because I think it must have been 2 years ago since we've had a visit from them, and we have been saying that they should be coming back to this committee.
Yeah, I think if I may, they're doing a number of talks, and I think maybe whether the council meetings would be the right forum to explain what they're doing, where they're doing, and how they're doing it. That's something I think they'd be happy to do as well.
Sorry, we have noted the report, but I just see Councillor Noires has a question.
Whenever we need to, do we have his contact details, please?
That's another thing. You don't get my email address. Yeah.
Yes.
We do. I think
We'll circulate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, first of all, can I thank you very much for the long wait that you've had. I think it's, well, you can see that some of the questions are, can demand lengthy explanations. So, but we're very grateful that you're ready now. If you'd like to, I think, introduce yourselves as the other panelists have done, that would be helpful.
That one? Yeah, go for it. Welcome, yeah. Good afternoon, Matt Wickham, Chief Operating Officer for Freedom Leisure. Colleagues will come on to.
Hi, I'm Paul Doyle, Regional Manager for Freedom Leisure.
I'm Simon Pesci-Smith, Contract Manager for Freedom Leisure.
And I'm Phil Hughes, I'm Head of Leisure Services at Fenland Council, so I liaise closely with Freedom. Just like to offer Councillor Miscandlin apologies as well. He booked a holiday long before this committee was set up.
We are actually going to go through your presentation, if you wouldn't mind, so.
Good afternoon, everybody. So welcome to our 22-23 review. So I'm proud to say that we have over 110 sites. We've continued to win contracts throughout what's been a very, very difficult period over the last few years. We're working with 24 different councils, and we have a variety of different things within Freedom Leisure, such as 2 theatres, castles. We have a fabulous facility in Chatteris, lovely one in Hudson, and also in Manor and George Campbell. In terms of the footfall we've had through the doors, our Learn to Swim programme over the 22-23 period was the very first time we broke 3,000 children every single week swimming with us. It was a goal that had been set about 1.5 years ago, which we finally managed to achieve last year, and having over 3,000 children every single week is something that we're very, very proud of. Our membership base has continued to increase as well. We finished just shy of 4,000 members at the end of 23, sitting at 103% of our 21-22 numbers. We again continue to progress. Sorry. And 121% of our pre-COVID. So COVID, as it did with everything, hit us incredibly hard. So we have managed to regain 20% of where we were. We're not back to our pre-COVID numbers, but from where we came back after COVID, we've had a vast improvement. We also achieved 106% of our target for our budget. And then within the company, we are 3rd in England in terms of our LTS growth, and also 3rd for our children's activities across the whole of Freedom.
There's a long delay on your slide, Simon.
Oh, is there?
Okay. 10 seconds off.
Staffing, supply and energy costs have been significantly higher for the last 6 months, and they do remain higher into the current year. Recruitment since coming back from COVID has been incredibly challenging across all areas. So whether that's been for a lifeguard all the way up to general managers, it's been a very, very difficult task to get people back into the business. I'll just wait a moment.
Quite a long delay.
Yes, isn't it? Thank you. So just to go through our membership. So I'd said that we were just shy of 4,000. I'm a stickler for details. So I'm sure you can imagine being 2 people short of 4,000 was a bit tricky for me to take. But Chatteris has moved on incredibly well. We have a new fitness manager there who's taken the bull by the horns. And as you can see from the numbers, he's led that growth himself. He started on the 1st of February, and he's made significant changes and a different ethos to the way that the site's being managed, which is bearing fruit in its memberships. The George Campbell, again, has also had a 14% variance from 2020. Hudson has also improved. Hudson has a fabulous gym offering, so that's a strong, really strong site when it comes to what we have. As I'm sure you all know, that has a little bit of absolutely everything at that site. And Manor is sadly, it's been the one that's hit the hardest. So with the facilities that it has and the competition it has in its local area, this is the one that's felt the force of the changes that we've had to do to make sure that we can stay viable. Sadly, Manor's the one that's taken the brunt of this. With the local competition offering what it does, the services that we have there are excellent, but with the changes we've had to make, sadly, this is the one that we've had a drop in. But I'm also pleased to say that overall, we still hit a 6% growth from where we were. I'm going to talk to you a bit about LTS Swim School. So I'll start off with a little bit of background before the numbers pop up. So what you're about to see is our Learn to Swim members. While 2 sites have seen a small drop compared to the start of the year, the whole on a crease has gone up. So as I said, that our target was 3,000. As you can see, as you will see, oh, there we go. As you can see, we started 2022 just shy of the 3,000 mark, which is a target that we've been pushing for quite some time. And we had achieved that in June time of 22-23. And I'm very happy to say that we are continuing to prove past that point now. So I won't give you the numbers right now, but we have continued to increase. And we're just shy of 3,200. So we continued the development of where we are, and we continue to be very proud of the amount of children we have swimming each week. The biggest growth we've seen so recently is Manor, is the first one that's broken 1,200 for the very first time. Hudson has been consistently above 1,100, and our George Campbell site has got a project number that's working towards, and it's been pulling out all the different stops and different ways to market it, and it's pushed past 800, and it's got no intention of stopping anytime soon. So what you can see now is some of the ways that we've marketed. So we've taken a different approach to how we kind of interact with our customers. We're trying to show the social side of what we do. Instead of it being just stock images, we like to show that the people using our facilities and what it is the activities they get up to. And then we use that, whether that's promoting our services in the 10's grades, or whether that's joining free this weekend, or whether it's coming and have their fun at the winter boot camp. We try and find the different ways to interact with the different populations. There's a whole host of different people within our communities from all sorts of different ages. And we need to make sure that we can find different ways to interact with all these different people. It's really, really important that we find the right notes to hit for the right people within the community. This is some of the resources that we have internally. So as I mentioned, and as you all know, over the last several years, there's been some very, very difficult things to deal with for everybody. So it's important that within our company that we support our staff as well as our customers. So these are some of the ways that we make sure that we can help and try and make sure that the people we have can progress themselves, and also make sure that they can look after themselves. With the different wellness programs we have, or the support we have from HR, or our external companies that we have that we work for, so we make sure that the well-being of the staff is cared for, just not from in-house, but also from external points. Sorry, I thought you had a question for a second there. So as I mentioned before, recruitment has been very, very difficult. We continue to evolve the way that we show the different activities that we're after. We changed from a system where pre-COVID, it was very much that we'd put on courses, people would come to them, and then we'd employ them for whatever that might be. So it might be a gym staff or swim teaching or a lifeguard. The environment, the nature of what we do is very, very different now. We are very much focused on, we will provide that training for you. If you've got the skills, if you've got the enthusiasm, we can give you the training, that's not a problem. But what we want from you is a willingness to be a swim teacher, a willingness to be a lifeguard, a personal trainer, whatever it might be. Then that part, in terms of the training, will take care of that, because we want you to be in our company, delivering the services that we have for our community. And what we have found is, from the systems that we've been doing, from the way that we've changed our approach, we're getting a lot more of our community. And we tend to find that, even today I was talking to the manager at George Campbell, we're getting a lot more of our members saying, actually, I'd quite like to work for you. And that's across the board. So that's the training positions, that's the non-training positions. We're a company that people want to work for. And we find that when we have customers that want to work for us, that means we're doing the right things because they see it, they pay to come to us and they think, actually, I'd quite like to work for you. So that for me is a real good tick in the box to show that the service that we're offering is what we need to do. We're also supporting Active Fenland. So predominantly our part in this is making sure that we provide our facilities that they can be used. So there are different activities you can see on there. So pre-fit classes, GP referral schemes, walking football. We've been looking at a whole host of different things, and we've been making sure that we have that facility available. So whether it's the sports hall at Hudson to be able to play for the adult badminton or the ladies badminton or the junior badminton, or whether it's interacting with the GP referral scheme at George Campbell, or whether it's our pre-fit classes, because that's something that sometimes people forget, that sometimes people are a bit nervous to go to the classes before they've had that interaction. So these are some of our customer comments. I'll read a few of them out to you. My fitness has really improved and I can feel some really positive changes in my body, including my confidence in my fitness. Love going to the gym. Huge part of that is the staff. They make you feel welcome and always helpful. So again, that feeds back to that these 10 people want to then come and work for us. A professional run centre with very friendly atmosphere. Staff make you feel welcome and facilities have a good choice of equipment. And then staff are wonderful. The staff are the heart of our business. We serve our community and we serve all branches of our community. But if we don't have the right people delivering the right services, we can't provide the right services to our customers, to our community. We're all part of the community. We all use the facilities, and then we have the right people coming in and we're able to provide that service. So some of the highlights that we've had over the past 12 months, a member of staff have completed their level 4 FAME training, which is a fall and management exercise, now completing the pre-fit classes and collaboration. Just put a little context in the achievement of that. There are another 12 centres in our local region. This is the only person that we've had in the last 12 months that have passed this qualification. So it's not something that it just gets handed out. They've done really well to achieve this. I have to mention a thank you to FTC for all the new wet showers. We had an awful lot of compliments about this at Hudson, so thank you very much. George Campbell recently had some spinning events where they managed to raise over £3,600 for the Mags Pass Air ambulance. They're now world famous events where they do have people, instructors coming in from all over the globe to come and deliver these classes. Chatteris, we've reconnected with the local GPs when I mentioned the GP surgeries earlier. It's one of the areas that Sam has improved. He's brought this to the forefront. And he's spearheading that, as well as interacting with the younger demographic. As I'm sure you all know, the school is just behind. And it's fair to say that our approach to some of our community before Sam came in wasn't what it should have been. But Sam came in, very much realised very quickly what we should be doing, and he's adjusted what we're offering at that site to make sure we're meeting the needs of the community. And Manor, I'm very, very happy about this, broke 1,200 children for their swim school. So every single week they have over 1,200 children coming to their swim school. And I'm sure I don't need to tell you guys that swimming is a life skill, which is whether it's you're on holiday or walking across the rivers, it's something that everybody needs. So it's a really wonderful thing to know that there's 1,200 children at Manor and over 3,000 children across the whole of the sites that we do that are learning that life skill. We've made some significant changes. We've also taken out some of the gaps that were still there in the swim school programme. Sorry, not the swim school, in our normal timetable. So we've tried to make it easier for people to come in and just have a swim. And we made those corrections fairly early on in February, and we got some really, really good positive feedback. In fact, there were some people that were worried they were going to have to stay in the pool for 2 hours. We reassured them they didn't have to swim for 2 hours, and they were much happier after that. So we have our energy. As you can see, the black line is our previous 12 months, and then the bars are our 22-23. July into August is when we started to implement a series of sort of non-negotiables for our energy usage. So we looked at best practice across the company, and we brought these together as a head office, brought these together. So they went out to people to find out what was working and what we could do. These were then collaborated together, which were then sent out to the company. And we started to instigate these from around about July, August. You can see from August that we started to catch up with where we needed to be. And then we came and we sort of flatlined the bar. There were some significant changes put into place. And then again, there were some significant changes put into place from February. where we were looking at our facilities. And what was really, really key is when we made these energy changes is that we didn't impact on our customers. We wanted to make sure that if we were turning the lights off, you know, it wasn't going to be an issue whatsoever. If we were going to adjust the heating slightly, if we were going to adjust whatever it might have been, the air handling units, that the impact on the customer wasn't detrimental to the service, because ultimately, as I've mentioned several times, if we don't have our community, we don't have a service. So we had to make sure that we found that balance between running the facilities that they love and they enjoy, and then making sure we can run in those facilities that they love and enjoy. February 2022, and I think this is something that is often forgotten now, is when COVID restrictions were actually lifted. So in that first section where you can see the black line is a little bit lower, that was still coming off the back of COVID and trying to make sure that we tried to catch up to where we actually still were. So our footfalls were still a little bit lower, and that's where we managed that the impact was really felt from July, August onwards. And in terms of changes in the local, so Fenland now sits within the new region of South East, and Paul is the regional manager. Chatteris, as I've mentioned, Sam is now the fitness manager, and I'm temporarily the area manager for Fenland. And it's been a pleasure the time I've been involved. And the only thing I'd like to also mention is that in 22-23 we had over 500,000 visits to our 4 centres, which was a vast improvement on the year before. So I'm quite proud of what the team have offered and the service they've managed to do. And as I've mentioned, over the 3,100 children swimming with us and over 500,000 visits to the facilities. Yeah, I'm quite proud of them. I have clicked onto the next slide, not that you're going to know for about another 16 seconds. Which is also the final slide. Sorry, you can't see it.
You don't need it, doesn't say.
No, there's nothing there. I think I can press. Oh, there we go.
Okay, thank you very much for that presentation. It's now open to discussion, so are there any questions?
Yeah. In terms of, you know, I understand that the energy bills have gone up, but in terms of reducing your opening hours, and the effects that that has had on your bills, how does that balance out in terms of, I'm talking specific, I'm a member of your Manor gym in Whittlesea. I have heard that a lot of customers left at that point because some of them, we have a lot of people that work at Peterborough City Hospital, the RAF Wittering and places like that, when they're coming off a 12-hour shift, 7 to 7, for example, and you're closing at 8, only gives them sort of, you know, by the time they've driven there, it's sort of 7:30. It's not viable for them to continue with their membership. So I'm just wondering, in terms of the membership that's been lost through that, has it balanced out in terms of the bills, you know, the cost of running?
I think it was the right thing to do. We faced a very uncertain time, and some of the measures that were agreed to put in place were to reduce the hours. I've been involved with the contract since the 1st of February, and one of the first things that I was keen to look at was the timetables. So as I mentioned earlier, I stripped out, there were gaps that was there that shouldn't have been there anymore. There was space that was not being used that could have been used. And there were times where Manor in particular was open for the swim club, but we'd closed off other sections of the building. So those things, we knew the impact it was having on the customers, and we knew that we had to work within a particular framework. So I worked with the centre manager there to make sure that we could maximise everything we did have. So we've looked at, we now have the gyms open till 9 o'clock each night. So we now have, it's only 9 till 10, which is where we're not open at the moment. And generally speaking, when you look at our footfall, the footfall actually coming into the building after 9 and 10 is very, very minimal. So in terms of the customers that were using the facility pre the hour change, there's very, very minimal change in terms of our target audience. If you're looking to go to a gym after sort of 9, 10 o'clock at night, generally speaking, you want one of the 24-hour gyms, and that doesn't tend to be our market. But we did open that up very, very quickly. We saw an instant increase on that. And as you rightly said, and I mentioned it earlier, Manor is the one that suffered. And it suffered from roughly October time, which is when we made the changes. And that's continued until around about 6 weeks ago when we finally hit the bottom of the curve, and we are now improving. And that's through the taking of the way of the timetable, the adjusting the way we do, the increasing the facilities, and we're looking at our classes, making sure that we have on as many as we can as possible, promoting what we do, the different services. We have now hit the bottom of that, and we now very much are on the way back up. At the time, it was the right thing to do, and as we moved into February, the right thing to do was to assess it and make the changes that we could without having any major additional costs. We were able to work within what we had to expand the service that we had.
Can I just add into that if I could? I think it's fair to say that we're not planning and haven't planned to do anything that would take the commercial viability backwards. But we have had to make some fairly serious changes across the portfolio, undoubtedly. But Simon's point there for me was really that where we think it's not working, we're flexible enough to change again, and that's what you've seen more recently. We're not going to get every decision right. You know, what we're doing now is something we haven't ever had to go through previously. Depending on whether you merge COVID and energy together as one, which I kind of have, so I can try and block out a whole 3-year period. So yeah, I think that's the key for us. We'll continue to review, monitor to make sure we're getting the best commercial return as we can for the facilities.
Thank you.
Councillor Hay.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions. My first one is, it would seem that Freedom Leisure are beginning on the road to getting more on an even keel than they have been in the past 3 years. What plans do you have in place to start repaying the loans that FTC has made to Freedom Leisure?
I think it's a valid question. As you're hopefully aware, there's a contracted agreement in place for better repayments. So it will all be based on the viability. So the more we can do to make the contracts viable, the better. I think probably important to take back to when you outsourced originally, the saving that was generated. So obviously you're already getting the benefit of that, and so we've got to do better than what we put into our bid at that point. We're obviously working to do that, and we'll work with Phil and officers as much as we can over the remaining contract period.
Thank you for that. I do have a concern that some of the exercise classes, particularly in Chatteris, are not consistent. For instance, Pilates. That sometimes they're on, sometimes they're not. What is being done to make sure that you have a consistent offer, on a regular basis?
Yeah. So again, this is something that I've been looking at with Sam, and fortunately, Chatteris, with it being a fairly small site, has been hit with several different staffing issues, a whole range of them, which have impacted us on a short-term to slightly longer-term basis. It's something that we've been looking at to see if we can bring somebody else in to provide additional cover. If there's somebody in-house who would like to be trained up, so again, we have that additional cover. It hasn't escaped our attention that the difficulties we faced have caused problems, but no, we are aware of it, and we're trying to find the best solution that we can get to, both as soon as we can, but also the one that was going to provide cover going forward. So not just we need something on Saturday, but that won't work next Saturday. We're trying to look at both at the same time and get there. We're not trying, we are looking at both to get there.
Probably aimed more towards the FDC officer. And this question is being put forward basically because we have quite a few new members on this committee, new members to the council. And I'd just like you to explain what the division of responsibility in the contract between Fenland and Freedom Leisure is, and how the responsibilities for maintenance and repair are divided.
Thank you, Councillor. Generally, the day-to-day upkeep of the leisure centres is Freedom's responsibility. So if a ceiling tile's broken or a light's out, or I don't know, the mastic in a shower's gone mouldy, I don't know, the pool hoist is not working, that would be Freedom's responsibility. The annual maintenance of all the equipment like boilers, etc., that would be Freedom. If it's a whole part of a system, that would be a capital cost. For instance, the CHP unit at the Manor's offline at the moment, that would be Fenland Council's responsibility because it's part of the building fabric per se. Does that make sense? So replacing a ceiling tile would be Freedom. Replacing the whole ceiling would be Fenland because it remains our building. And we do have a capital programme in place. I'm working with Mark Greenwood, who's our head of properties, to develop a programme over the next couple of years So we're working proactively on the planned preventative maintenance for the FDC aspect of that.
Councillor Gerstner.
Thank you. Thank you very much to Freedom and to Fenland District Council for keeping leisure facilities available to the public during COVID and after COVID. I think it's a fantastic testament you've been able to do that. That's the good news. Second good news is I'd like to thank you for your ability to cater for disabled people at your leisure facilities. I think that goes unnoticed to many people, but we've had a slight increase in availability to disabled people, and I think that's good as well. On the negative side, sorry, why does it take so long to get repairs completed? Small repairs, I can give you an example. A shower goes wrong in a disabled toilet, took nearly 4 months to repair. Is there a hierarchical system of moving up the tree as a whole in maintenance and facilities, or is each site allocated work on a need to be basis?
A little bit of both. So some elements will fall to the site. It shouldn't have taken 4 months to replace the shower. Without knowing the full details of it, I couldn't tell you what the issue was. So if, for example, if it's a shower head, yeah, that should be, you know, days, not 4 months. In terms of hierarchical, as we've mentioned, we've faced a very, very difficult period over the last 3 years, and we're not in the same position as maybe we were 3.5 years ago. So sometimes, yes, things take priority. So for example, if the main pool heating pump was going to break and it was going to close the building, or we had a shower head that wasn't working, then if we can only do one, we're going to do the main heating because that's going to close down the entire building. So it kind of does depend on what the issue is. But no, a shower shouldn't have taken a couple of months. But without knowing the specifics, I couldn't tell you if it was something behind the scenes, which was more of a problem. We've also found that over the last 18 months, with everything happening and all of the changes that have happened in the world, where sometimes our contractors would say, yeah, no worries, 2 weeks we'll be there. It's now, well, I'll tell you what, I'll get you a quote in about 3 months, and then the part might be in the country in about another 3 months. And then as long as it's not compounded somewhere, then Christmas. And that's not something that we've had to deal with, but it's something that we've had to try and manage in. So it's something, repairs, if it's something like you mentioned, mastic, you know, we'll go to Screwfix and we'll do it. When it becomes technical, it depends on where it's being sourced from.
Thank you. B&Q shower doesn't take 4 months to repair.
As I said, if that's literally all the issue was, then no, it shouldn't have taken 4 months.
And the other question I've got while I remember now is, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong. When our heating system goes wrong at Whittlesea, at the pool, I was told it costs £400 for an engineer to come out and look at it. Am I correct or not?
You're very close. £300.
But that includes an element of work as well. So
Yeah,
if
first-
there's an initial.
Yeah.
So is that figure correct?
It's £300 for a visit, and then within that visit, if they can rectify the issue there and then they can.
Right.
But the Whittlesea issue sadly wasn't a turn up and within it's fixed within a 1 hour. It was a bigger problem that caused, well, a knock-on effect for
At the
about a
moment,
week
we're
and a half.
aware of the costs that you're incurring, and we as a council would then deliberate on whether you then value of whatever it's for money, you know. But that's that. But I wasn't found.
They're very good at what they do, and as Matt said, within that time they will try and fix things. I've had plenty of examples of where engineers have turned up and they've gone above and beyond, or there's been 2 parts of the machine and they've been able to put them together to provide as a service, because they're aware just as much as we are that sometimes a brand new pump might. I've got an example of another site where a brand new pump took 3 months to turn up. They installed it and it was faulty. So luckily they were able to put together another one we had to give us a service. So the people that turn up are excellent. They'll turn up and they'll do their absolute best to get us back to where they can be. I haven't come across any of our engineers yet that will turn up and go, I mean, I could fix it, but I'm off the clock now. And then they'll leave. They're very, very good.
Thank you for that.
Yes, go.
I just chip in there as well. Obviously, Freedom are a big organisation, running many leisure centres, so they have a lot more purchasing power than Fenland Council did. So in terms of their contracts with their contractors, they've got a lot more clout than we ever would have. So, you know, what Simon's saying is absolutely spot on. These are engineers that they know that are servicing lots of different sites. Sometimes they source local engineers as well, but they certainly have the clout to get the job done. And they're a commercial organisation as well, albeit a charitable trust. So they will make sure they get a good deal for our contract and their contracts. And the other point I'd like to make is if something isn't being fixed as quickly as it ought to be, and you guys are using the site or you're hearing from local people who are using the site, please get in touch with either portfolio holder or myself, and we'll discuss with, you know, the area and regional management and say, look, these issues have come up. Can you give me more detail, and we'll pass it back to you and or get it fixed as quickly as we can.
And we know, of course, a lot of the equipment is very old these days and needs a bit of TLC. So thank you.
Councillor Nawaz.
The relationship between leisure, exercise and health is undeniable. Public health is going to become increasingly more important, and greater focus will be placed, is being placed on it. And it is encouraging to know that the membership at various leisure centres has increased. And it is commendable that the number of children being taught to swim has actually increased in the manner. That said, it is also a cause for concern that the membership has decreased from 22 by 100. I think it's almost exactly 110% or thereabouts. I have it in front of me. This is worrying because since then, I believe Whittlesea has expanded considerably. And I'm open to corrections on this. I think there have been at least 1,000 new homes being built, and more are being built. One would therefore expect an increase, not a decrease, in the membership. And I note also the measures that you have taken, which is essentially more of the same. So I wonder if there could be some other reason why there is falling membership, apart from the, you know, if I may use this word, tinkering with the little things. Is there a case for capital expenditure to develop, expand new facilities, to bring them at par with other neighbouring facilities, as was alluded to earlier by my fellow councillor Elizabeth? People are actually going from Whittlesea to Wittering, to Peterborough, to the regional, to Hampton, including myself. I go there, not because I want to. I do not wish to drive an extra 9-10 miles to, and then another 9-10 miles back. I have visited the manor. Do you not think it is a little bit outdated, and there is a strong case for new sort of capital expenditure, even a building? I hear, and again, somebody I'm sure will be able to correct me, that part of it is due for demolition, and perhaps the new buildings. And I think I'm sitting next to the right personnel. Isn't there a case? Yes, that's a bonus. Isn't there a strong case to cater for the future rather than the past? That, you know, I'm sorry to say that, but what you're saying is going more to the past rather than making a radical change for the future.
Okay, to answer that one, Chair. We have had COVID. Now we've got the energy crisis. I think the other thing we haven't mentioned is the cost of living crisis as well. And if you're looking at your mortgage and your food, or your gym membership, there's certainly going to be pressure on the gym memberships. So what I would say is that Freedom are doing all they can and a good job with the tools at their disposal to keep those memberships up and keep those learn to swim memberships up as well. In terms of capital expenditure, we do have some facilities that are of an age, and the new portfolio holder, Carol Pilson, the director, and myself, we've had a look at the facilities, and Councillor Miss Canlon's interested to understand what a 5, 10 and 15-year plan might look like for the leisure centres. So I think we need to look forwards. But at the moment, you know, Alex has only been in post a few weeks, and that will be a long-term project.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much. But I think, as you mentioned, that and there is kind of implicit recognition of what the case that I'm arguing for. You have said that Hudson has had a very healthy increase, I think about 100 or so, but you know, simultaneously almost you said that they have fabulous gym facilities. Yes, so I think there is a linkage, perhaps not so scientifically correlated, but there is definitely a linkage.
Thank you. So when the contract started with Freedom in late 2018, part of the contract deal was we looked at the facility at the Hudson. So the district council invested best part of £1 million changing the gym and the dance studio there. Quite a sum of money. And then, of course, we had COVID, didn't we? So we're behind where we thought we'd be, or where Freedom thought they'd be, with membership growth at that site. But investment in leisure facilities, they're generally big numbers. So it is a case of planning ahead rather than, oh, we need to do something now. This is something, you know, it'll be years, not months, before any plans are put in place.
Chair, we'd be very happy with $1 million in Whittlesea, but and we have something more sort of solid, structured sort of program in the foreseeable future. I know it's asking a lot.
That's what Councillor Campbell has asked us to look into. So it will be some time before we come back to Council's Cabinet for a discussion of, you know, which direction we should be heading.
So I shouldn't renew my membership at Hampton in Peterborough next year.
You shouldn't have been a member there anyway. If you live locally, you know, the Manor Leisure Centre has got a fantastic gym with top equipment. They've got a great exercise class as well, classes in their sports hall. So they do have the facilities. I mean, that swimming pool you've got in Whittlesea, it's probably the second best in the county, I'd say, after the regional pool. It's magnificent. And given its size compared to the number of people living in Whittlesea, you've got an absolute gem there. But I appreciate one of the buildings is quite old, and we do need to look for the future and plan ahead, because, as I say, the cost would be considerable, and it's not a case of doing something half-cocked. You need to have a good plan in place and find out where that funding is coming from and whether it's affordable.
I look forward to the plan, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Gowler.
Thank you. I'll just jump in there and remind people that Chatteris hasn't got a swimming pool. That's not what I want to ask. I'm just interested in staffing levels across Fenland and staff retention. This is more from my curiosity than anything. Is something that I'm aware of, not across the whole district in every business. Certainly since COVID. I know you've mentioned about recruitment and things like that. Do you have, so I guess the question is, how many people do you employ? How many spare positions, the open positions have you got? And do you struggle with staff retention?
So we just have just over 200 people. We do have some vacancies. We have a vacancy at Hudson for a duty manager. We have a couple of positions out for receptionists. We recently filled a lifeguard position at Manor, which then opened up a gymming position, which I'm pleased to say we very, very quickly then filled as well. We have a couple of casual lifeguard positions open as well. The issues in terms of retention, it's two. So one part is we don't have any problems whatsoever. Some people will stay with us for years and years and years. And then we have other issues where literally just this week, I had somebody call me and said, we've had somebody accept the job, marvellous. Half an hour later, they said, no, they've now turned down the job. And luckily, we were offering out the position. We'd split the hours between two people, and the other person had said, yeah, no, I'd love to help them. So, I mean, that is literally the yin and yang of where we are. We have one person who's very happy to do it, and then we have a vast amount of people who don't do it. Just to add a bit of context, when I was talking about the struggles with recruiting, when we are interviewing for lifeguards, the very first question we have to ask is, can you swim? And it's for a lifeguard position. And I appreciate you laughing. I had somebody, I said, oh, great, can you swim? And they just went, no. I was like, I don't know if this job's for you. And they went, really? I was like, no, really? Oh, okay. That's the kind of questions that we're facing. So some people, yes, they are staying for as long time. We've had people that have joined us since COVID who are still with us. And we have people who joined us this week, who are not now with us. So it's a mixture.
Thank you. That sounds quite promising. Thank you.
Councillor Booth.
Thank you, Chair. So I've checked back at the minutes the last time you were here, which was November 21. I don't think it was only you were actually here. But it was, but one of the points I noted, and I think it's the same in this presentation, is that you've got very positive customer feedback. And I think I made the point that we need to have more balanced data. And that was a commitment that you gave to us at the time, that you'd give us proper complaints data going forward. So obviously I'm not expecting you to give us any sort of data at this moment, but obviously if you can provide that going forward and make sure it is included, because it's from that we can get feedback from people and improve the situation. I've had feedback that the classes and that they just don't suit people's sort of lifestyles and times, which is what a lot of other councils have said today. And I think it's taking on board that feedback, looking at what people are saying to you and amending it is how you're actually going to drive forward greater membership and improve customer satisfaction. Because I think one of the other things we've mentioned is about the maintenance of the buildings. I often get complaints about that. I think the last time I said, there's a lot of feedback on social media about, buckets left in corridors where you had leaks sort of thing. I think you have improved the situation since then, but unless we get that complaints data, if we look at it objectively, we can't improve the service we're providing.
I'll let Simon talk specifically about the reports, but we certainly analyse that data and we can make that available, and we do anyway. Yeah. But what I would say is that we don't get so many complaints that it needs to be a big formal procedure. We can be very, very bespoke, especially in Fenland. So if we do have a complaint that is escalated beyond the site, that would normally involve myself and Simon. We would offer to meet with those people and do that as well. So we deal with them quite efficiently, and we can deal with them personally ourselves. So it is a very bespoke service, but we do analyse that and we do keep feedback on that. So we don't need to wait for the next report. We can make sure we just provide that. It's quite easily done.
Yeah, and I think the point is it's not just waiting for someone to write in a formal letter. It's like looking at things like social media, seeing what people are saying and taking that on board. It's not about denying that complaints happen. It's about using it as an opportunity to improve what we've already got.
We have a system whereby we record verbal complaints. We can do the exact same thing for social media as well, so that we can look back and see patterns and do that as well, and make sure we're putting our resources in the right place as well. So yeah, absolutely right. Thank you.
Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, back to my point again about getting in touch with the council. I think if customers aren't happy with the response they get from the centre manager, then local councillors tend to hear, or I get a message, and then I'll speak to the area manager or regional manager as well. So customers can deal with the company, but if the company's not responding as the customer might want, then they'll come to the district council and we'll have that discussion. I know Paul was in contact with someone about the pool temperature at the Manor this morning. So like he says, it is quite bespoke, and the message does get to people who can take action quickly.
That Phil. Do we have any more questions? No, thank you then. If there are no further speakers, then the update is noted, and if you could actually get hold of some of that data and let us have that, that would be brilliant moving forward. Thank you very much for your time today. Thank you. I'm sorry you had such a long way. Right, the next item on the agenda can be found at pages 81 to 86 of the agenda pack, and is a report requesting the approval of recommendations in relation to the continuation of the task and finish group established by the previous panel. Amy, can I get you to introduce this?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, during the last municipal year, the Overview and Scrutiny panel set up a task and finish group, the purpose of which was to look at the key performance indicators that we set for ourselves in line with the delivery of the business plan. And that group met on several occasions during the course of the last year, but unfortunately, due to various reasons, it wasn't possible for them to complete their objectives prior to this new panel being appointed. It's an important piece of work that has been sort of requested by the past panel, and in respect of which quite a lot of work has already taken place with previous members and officers. So it's something that we would like to conclude and which the previous panel committed to doing. So the purpose of this report is to recommend that this panel nominates replacement members to the group, up to a total of 3 members, 2 Conservative and 1 opposition, with 1 substitute each where available. And it's also recommended that where possible, the membership is comprised of the 2 former members of the task and finish group who remain on Overview and Scrutiny panel. And that's Councillors Hay and Councillor Booth, although I appreciate, Councillor Hay, that you were a substitute member previously. This provides obviously that continuity that you might find beneficial when entering into new discussions of the remaining elements that need to be looked at. And also to agree in conjunction with that, the proposed amendments to the terms of reference of the task and finish group, which I've tracked changed in the appendix. It's a fairly minor amendment to say that the task and finish group will report its suggestions to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee at its meeting on the 16th of October 2023, which obviously reflects that we've got this continuation, that extra time needed. So that's the request, please. Basically, anyone who steps forward to fulfil this task will obviously be given a detailed overview of what's gone before, so that they're able to sort of step in and take on the work from there. And then we will bring a future report to this panel setting out all of the work that everybody has done to bring it to a conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. So this item is now up for discussion. Has anyone got any? Yeah, I thought you might.
I propose we move it forward. The only observation I've got about setting a date of October is we're hostage to circumstances as we were previously. Should we just keep it open? Yeah, as and when we finish the work. I think that the real deadline we want to get things done by is the end of the year, because that's when it will feed into the business plan, isn't it? And that whole process. So that's my only observation.
Thank you. Anyone else? No?
But for the purposes of continuity, I probably need to try and be at those meetings, don't I? So, as I'm the only one that's been to previous meetings, so, yeah.
That's fine, because we would obviously work with.
Sorry. Can I just ask a question? Obviously, the substitutes need to be a member of overview and scrutiny. Is there opposition members on here? I appreciate your independent.
On the line.
Is there, because I only noticed one here today.
Yeah. So, again,
Councillor Blue.
Councillor Roy is the other member, but he's obviously giving his apologies for today. But technically, with a task and finish group, you don't have to do it on political proportionality if you need to. We could appoint people who've got specific skills, but when it was set up, it was agreed to do it on political proportionality. So
Basically, you're saying that you're going to make sure that you try and attend the meetings and well, I
Yeah.
assume he will if you can't.
yeah,
if someone
basically, yeah, because
feels-
there's only one other, well, unless Councillor Gerson wanted to be the substitute, I suppose it's the, I mean, technically, I think I could nominate anyone, couldn't I? So unless anyone else wants to be a substitute, I guess is the question I'm throwing out to the floor. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
We get there in the end. So the nominations that are all agreed, and the recommendation is to agree the proposed amendments to the terms of reference of the task and finish group, which are shown as the track changes on page 86 of the agenda pack. Can we agree those changes? Yeah.
Yeah, the only observation I had was about setting the October date in stone. So should we say by the end of 2023 instead?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I usually like to have some sort of goal, otherwise things tend to sort of drift, but I think there's been problems here all along, hasn't there? So yeah, we'll accept that then.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And business for the panel up to October 23, and that was set by the previous panel. Member services will be updating the future work programme through to the end of the current municipal year in readiness for the next meeting, and this will comprise standing items such as the business plan and budget items. Throughout the year, members of the panel can then consider what additional items they may wish to see added. But for the time being, I'm proposing that we continue with what was previously planned. Is that agreed? Yeah. Okay. The final item on the agenda is to provide an opportunity to discuss any meetings which are considered urgent, and I confirm that there are none. This marks the end of the meeting, and I declare the meeting closed. The next meeting of ONS is scheduled to take place on the 18th of September at 2:30. Thank you. Thank you all very much. That was about an hour longer than I thought we were going to be, but there you go.